Hello everyone. So in the last video, we had completed the Charvaka chapter along with its PYQ, and in this video we will be starting with our next chapter, Jainism. So we had seen this that there are two kinds of classification of Indian schools of philosophy. One was heterodox schools and the other was orthodox schools. The heterodox schools do not believe in the authority of Vedas, whereas the orthodox school believe in the authority of Vedas. In the heterodox schools, there are three different kinds of schools: Charvak, Jainism, and Buddhism. So, as you see, Jainism is a heterodox school and hence they will not believe in the authority of Vedas. Okay, before starting this chapter, let's first look at the syllabus so that we can constrain ourselves to the syllabus only and not delve around anything other than these topics. So, as you will see in this syllabus, there are three subheadings: theory of reality, which means we will have to deal with metaphysics of Jainism school. Saptbhangine, this is just a part of epistemology of the Jain school. We will see what exactly this term means when we will be reading the chapter. And the third subheading is bondage and liberation. So, study of liberation or salvation is also known as soteriology. So, you can remember this term, right? So we will be reading about metaphysics, epistemology, and soteriology of Jainism school. Okay. Now, with respect to the relevance of this chapter, one question from Jainism came in 2023. It was a 10 marker, and as you will see, each year at least one question come from this chapter: 2022, 21, 2019, 18, 17, and there were even three questions in 2016. So as you can see, this is a very important chapter, not in only because there are questions coming from it every year, but also because these questions are very repetitive, as we will see when we will be doing the PYQs. And this chapter is thus relatively on the easier side. Thus, this can be handled pretty well and should be thoroughly completed. Okay, so let's now start with the chapter. In the first section, they have given an historical introduction. You can read this. I will not be going through this because there will be no questions from this. The second section, this is also not in our syllabus. The third section is also not in our syllabus. I will recommend you that after completing the sections which are relevant from the examination point of view, you can also give a read to these two sections if you want. There will be no questions coming from it, but if you want, you can read them. Now, the next subsection is Anekantvada. This is in our syllabus. So, Anekantvada is nothing but metaphysical doctrine of Jainas. So, this will talk about the metaphysics. Okay, so the Jaina metaphysics is a realistic and relativistic pluralism. It is called Anekantvada or the doctrine of manyness of reality. Okay, so these two lines tell you everything that is there about Anekantvada. So let's try to unpack these two lines. So you can see that they are talking about the metaphysics and they say that metaphysics is realistic and relativistic pluralism. So let's see what these terms realism, relativism, and pluralism mean. So what is realism in, when seen in the context of metaphysics? Realism simply means that things exist independent of our knowledge of them or independent of our consciousness. We have seen this in previous chapter as well when we were talking about Advaita Vedanta, that their metaphysics was idealistic. What was idealistic metaphysics? That there existed a pure consciousness, Brahman, and everything in this world, including the objects which you see, like the table you are seeing in your room or the chair on which you are sitting, they are derived from the consciousness. Consciousness is what is primary, right? So Such metaphysics is idealistic metaphysics because things exist depending on consciousness. Consciousness is what is primary according to them. Whereas in realistic metaphysics, as you have seen in with the Charvaka school, according to Charvaka school, matter was the objective reality. It was the basic reality, and even the consciousness was derived from matter only, right? So according to them, objects existed independent of consciousness. So in case of Charvaka, they reduced consciousness to matter only. But even if you consider consciousness to be an independent reality, like in the case of Jainas, still such a metaphysics can be realistic. How? Because they will say that Jainas will say that okay, there is separate consciousness, individual consciousness, but still whatever objects there are, like the table that is there in your room, they exist independent of any of the individual consciousness, right? So this is our common sense worldview as well. When you are sitting on a chair, you know that that chair exists in reality. It is not something dependent on your consciousness like a dream object. Okay, so what is the ontology of dream object? Do they exist independently of your consciousness? No. If you see a chair in your dream, that chair is just in your head, right? So this is the contrast between realism and idealism, objectively existing and subjectively existing. Okay, let's look at the next term, pluralism. Pluralism simply means that more than two basic kind of independent real entities exist. So in case of Charvaka, we saw that it was a monistic viewpoint, only matter was the basic reality. In case of Advaita Vedanta, we saw that Brahman or pure consciousness was the only reality. In case of when we were looking at mm, problem of interaction of Descartes in our introductory lecture, we saw that matter and soul were two independent realities. It was a dualistic school. In Jainism, it is a pluralistic school. There will be more than two kinds of entities. Matter and soul will be two, and there will be more entities as well, which we will come across later in this chapter. Okay. Now, the third term is relativism in the context of metaphysics. So, what is metaphysical relativism in Jaina philosophy? So, this is the main crux of Anekantvada, right? Realism was also present in Charvaka school, right? But relativism is what characterizes the Jaina metaphysics. Let's understand this now. This can be understood well using the example of elephant and blind men. This is a very famous example of metaphor for explaining the relativistic metaphysics, and the Jain scholars have themselves quoted this, right? So you can refer to this in your answers as well. Let's look at it. Okay, so this metaphor concerns with an elephant and six blind men who are perceiving an elephant, perceiving different body parts of an elephant and trying to convey what knowledge they are gaining. Okay, so here elephant is a metaphor for reality, and as you can see, this reality has many characteristics. Like it has a tail, it has legs, it has ears, it has trunks, it has horns, right? And the blind men, six blind men, represent individual humans who have limited capacity to perceive or limited capacity to know. Okay, consider this blind man. He is touching the tail of elephant. What will he say? He will say that when he will be asked a question, okay, so you can see that once upon a time there lived six blind men in a village. One day the villagers told them, hey, there is an elephant in the village today. They had no idea what an elephant was. They decided, even though we cannot see the elephant, let us go and feel it anyway. All of them went there where the elephant was. Each of them touched the elephant. So, what will be the blind man who touched the tail say? He will say that elephant is like a rope. He has access to only this limited aspect of reality, which is metaphorically represented here as elephant. Okay, so he will say that it is just a rope. Let's take another example. Let's take the example of this blind man who is touching the ear. What will he say? He will say that elephant is like a big manual fan. Okay, so are these two men correct? Yes, both of them are correct from their point of view. But is any of these man's knowledge absolute? No, their knowledge is only relative. The reality is many sided, but they only have access to certain aspects of reality because their perception power or the power to gain knowledge is itself limited. Right? So, this is the basic point that Jainas are trying to convey using this metaphor. Okay, let's return to the book now. So, you saw the example of elephant and blind man, right? Okay, so we were talking about relativism. What is relativism in your English language? Relativism simply means that a thing, when taken in relation to another thing. So the thing is always taken in relation to another thing. It does not exist independently, or it is not absolute. Right? That is what relativism means. Relative is opposite of the word absolute. Absolute is something which is complete by itself, independent, whereas relative is something which is incomplete by itself and has meaning only in relation to something else. Okay, so let's now talk about epistemological relativism. So, as you saw in the example of elephant and blind men, when a man was touching the tail and when the other man was touching the ear of the elephant, both of them were having different knowledge, and both of those knowledge, according to Jan, were correct, but correct from their viewpoint. So, right, this is known as epistemological relativism. How can we? Okay, now I will contrast it with absolutist view of epistemology so that you can understand well. In absolutist view of epistemology, we will say that both of them, the man who was touching the tail and the man who was touching the ear, both of them don't have knowledge. You remember when we were talking about epistemology in our Charvak chapter, we gave three conditions for epistemology. What were they? The three conditions were that there must be a belief, the belief must be true, and there must be a justification for the belief. Right? So, this justification part is what varies across different schools. So, some schools which have absolutist view of knowledge will say that no, both of them do not have knowledge about the elephant. Both men don't have knowledge about elephant because actually they don't have knowledge, right? They have only knowledge about certain aspect of elephant. They don't have knowledge about full elephant, right? But Jainas, they relax this justification. They relax the definition of this justification and they say that both of them have knowledge, and they will say that reality has many sides. Reality is many sided. So one side was the tail. This is just a metaphor, okay? That one side was just the tail, one side was ear, and both men have knowledge with respect to their perspective or the side of reality they were experiencing. Okay, so you see how they have relax the justification part. But to relax this justification, they have also given a kind of metaphysical explanation to it. What is the metaphysical explanation? If you will see here, they are saying that reality has many sides. Okay, so here they are talking about the reality. What is talking about reality is that is metaphysics. So they have changed the conception of reality itself. They have changed the conception of reality itself, that reality has many sides. This is what is Anekantvada. Okay, I will explain what many-sidedness of reality is and how it is different from our common sense perception of reality. We will come to that. Okay, so you have understood Jainism. Sorry, you have understood realism. Now I will come to staunch realism. So I use this term staunch realism to differentiate normal realism that we have in our common sense understanding from the kind of realism that Indian schools of philosophy like Jainism, Nyay, Vaisheshik, and Mimamsa follow. Right? So what is our common sense view of realism? For this, we will take help of two examples, one technical example and one common sense example. Let's look at a technical example of universals. Okay, so what are these universals? Let's see. So consider you have three cows. Okay. So each cow is an individual and each cow has something different than the other. Some cow must be bigger, some must be smaller, some must have white fur, some must have brown fur. Some of the cows are spotted, right? Some of the cows are taller. So each cow is different. But when we see three cows, even though they have a lot of differences, we can still classify them under one class, that is the class of cow. And we do this without thinking. We do this just by seeing them, right? We do it very naturally. So there has been an ancient question in philosophy regarding how do we perceive or conceptualize these classes, and these classes are called universals. Okay, so cowness is a universal. The concept of cowness is a universal. Okay, so I will come to cowness. So cowness is the concept which is present in each of the cow. This is the universal aspect that is present in each of the cow. So how do we explain this concept of universal? First, we will see a common sense understanding. You will say that when you say three cows, you are processing a lot of data and you are seeing a lot of similarities between the three cows. You might see that they have similar kind of shapes, they have similar kind of noses, they have similar kind of horns, and mostly I think it's when we think of it, it is mostly the shape which helps us recognize whether a certain animal falls under a certain class, and that's why we say that by all using all that data we say that this is a cow. So here this is a conceptual view of it, right? So there's nothing real, there's no entity, no objective universal which is separating the three cows. It's just that we see the individual cows and we form a concept, an abstract concept of cowness in our head, using which we classify all those animals in a certain class. Okay, so this is our common sense view of realism. Similarly, when you see cars, when you see three different kind of cars, then one might be a BMW, one might be an Audi, one might be a Hyundai. They are very different, but you still classify them under a concept of a abstract concept of a car. Why is it so? Because they have similar kind of shape, they have similar kind of functionality, and all those kind of things. Okay, this is a common sense realistic view that even though objects exist, but in when we talk about universals, it's just a concept inside our head. That concept does not have any objective reality. Now, let's talk about staunch realism, followed by Indian schools of philosophy, Indian schools like Jainism, Nyaya, Vaisheshik, and Mimamsa. They will say that three cows look similar because all of them have an objective universal associated with them, an objective universal of cowness. Okay, and when we see each individual cow, along with perceiving the individual cow, we also perceive this universal cowness. And because we perceive that universal cowness, we can say that okay, these three cows are belong to a class concept of cow. This might sound counterintuitive, but try to think from the perspective of people in the ancient times. They might not have a very clear conception of how our brain functions. They might just have thought that, okay, if three things are looking to us similar, there must be some kind of objective reality. Okay, this is an attitude. This is an attitude that whatever we perceive or whatever we conceptualize must be out there. So this is what is I say staunch realism. That even the concepts which we think now that are in the head, we used to think that there is an objective reality. Right? I also think I gave this example at some point of time that yeah, I think when we were discussing about Advaita Vedanta, we discussed about this that during the ancient time when people used to dream, they might just have thought that during the dreams they are transported to some other real place. They had nothing to distinguish between what is whether a dream object is less real than objects you perceive while you're awake. They must just have thought that it is another real place to which you go when you are asleep. Right? Similar kind of thing is here also. Okay, so this was, I think, using this example, I have made clear the difference between our common sense view of realism now and the staunch realism that some schools of Indian philosophy have. Okay, now we will see another example, the rails. When you stand at a track, you see that the two rails seem to be meeting or converging after a large distance, right? But you know that they are not actually converging. They are always parallel. It's just the way our eyes function that we see them to be converging. And how can we make sure, how can we prove that they are not converging? It's simple. We will just go 2 kilometers ahead. And okay, so I will present you with an experiment. So consider these are two parallel railway tracks, and at a long distance, say 2 kilometers, we have a flag. Okay, so in reality, these are always parallel, but let's imagine there is an observer here. For this observer, the rail tracks seem to be converging at this distance of 2 kilometers where there is also a flag. Okay, so but you now know that this is because this is an optical illusion. This is only because of the way that our eye function that we see it like this. How will you disprove that they do not meet? You will simply go to the place where the flag is there, and you will see that okay, the rails are parallel here as well, and hence we can simply infer that it was an optical illusion. Now, what will okay, so I will summarize now that in reality, in objective world, the rails are parallel, but the way we perceive it, we see them to be converging, right? And we understand both these things and the difference. But let's put a Jaina monk here. What will he say? He will say that because he's seeing these rails to be meeting, then they must meet in reality. This is not something in my head, but this is one of the characteristic of reality itself. You will say, no, this is wrong. This is just an optical illusion. Let me take to that place so that I can disprove you. And you take the Jaina monk to the place where there is flag, and he sees that the track here is parallel, and you might be like, see, I have disproved you. But that monk will say, no, you are right that here the tracks are parallel. But from that point of view, the tracks were meeting. So he will say that both things are real. The tracks were meeting as well at this flag, and the tracks are parallel well at this flag. But those both things are there from from different perspectives. Okay, so this is Jaina viewpoint. So one same reality, they will say this reality has two different aspects. That it meets at the flags, that two tracks, sorry, two rail meet at the flag, and two rails are parallel at the flag. Reality, these both things are real, just that they both are from different perspectives. But our common sense view will say that our common sense understanding or our common sense realism. This is Jaina realism, okay, and this is common sense realism. It will say that two rails are parallel, their meeting is just an optical illusion in our head and has no objective reality. Okay, right. So let's proceed now. I think you must have understood what I mean by many-sidedness of reality by now. Okay. So next line is we have seen the many-sidedness of reality. We will understand this in more detail in subsequent lines. Let's start. Matter, Pudgal. Matter is called Pudgal in Sanskrit, and spirit, Jeev. So spirit is nothing but soul, are regarded as separate and independent realities. There are innumerable material atoms and innumerable individual souls, which are all separately and independently real. And each atom and each soul possesses innumerable aspect of its own. Okay, so they are just saying that there is matter and spirit; these both exist independently. We have already seen that Jana is a pluralistic. Now let's focus on this line. A thing has got infinite number of characteristics of its own. Okay, you can relate this with many-sidedness of reality, right? But how many sides are there? We have not talked about that right now. They are saying that there are infinite sides of reality. Okay, we will come into this now. Come to this now. So every object possesses innumerable positive and negative characteristics. Now they are also saying that there are positive characteristics and there are negative characteristics. It is not possible for us. Okay, so this we will come to later. Now let's understand these two lines. Okay, so consider this is a ball, right? A is a ball. So one side of this reality, we have already seen that there are sides of reality from that rail example. From one side of reality, and this is the positive characteristic. Positive means something which is there, right? And negative means which is not there. So positively we can say that A is round. Ball is round, right? So we can say that one side of this reality of ball is that it is round, and this is positive side. And one side of the reality we can say that it is not cubic. This is the negative side because the ball is not cubic. Now again I will like to contrast our common sense view and Jana view. In by common sense view, ball is not cubic. This is just a concept, right? There is a ball and there is a concept of cube in our head, and we just match the ball we are seeing with the concept cube and we say that it's not matching. So this processing occurs in a head. But what will Jana say? They will say that no, the that A is not a cube, is not a concept in our head, but it is one side of the reality of ball itself. Okay, this is the difference between Jaina realism and common sense realism. Right. So these are the two sides. Now, how there are infinite number of sides? It's very simple. We can say that A is, let's say A is a cricket ball. It's a test cricket ball. Then it must be red. So one quality will be, characteristic will be that A is red. Another characteristic will be that A is not white. Another characteristic will be that A is not green. Another characteristic will be that A is not 3 kilograms. Another characteristic will be A is not 5 kilograms. Another will be that A is not 100 kilograms. So you see, right? How many sides of reality will be there? There will be infinite sides, which will be having both positive and negative characteristics. Positive characteristics will be like of the this format, and negative characteristics are of this format. So I think now you can appreciate both these lines, this and this one. Let's come to the next line. It is not possible for us ordinary people to know all the qualities of a thing. Of course, because there are infinite number of qualities, we, because we are finite, we have limited ability to process, we cannot know all the qualities of a thing. So what inference they are doing, they are carrying out from this, they are carrying out that we can know only some qualities of some things, right? That's obvious. To know all the aspects of a thing is to become omniscient. Okay, so what is omniscient? Omniscience means having knowledge of everything and anything. You must have heard this line that God is omniscient, which means that God has knowledge about everything and anything. Okay, God has infinite knowledge. Now, because a thing has infinite aspects, so knowing completely about a thing would mean that you have infinite knowledge, right? And that is why knowing completely about a thing will mean being omniscient. Therefore, the Jainas say that he who knows all qualities of one thing knows all qualities of all things, and he who knows all qualities of all things knows all qualities of one thing. I think this is obvious now because a thing has infinite number of sides. So if you can know one thing, you have infinite knowledge, and if you have infinite knowledge, you can know everything that there is. Simple. Human knowledge is necessarily relative and limited, and so are all our judgments. This is simple because we are finite and reality is infinitely many sided. So our knowledge, of course, is relative. We cannot have full knowledge of anything in this world. This epistemological and logical theory of Jainas is called Syadvad. Now, what is Syadvad? Syadvad is simply the epistemological doctrine that our knowledge is relative and our judgments are also relative. Now, you know about epistemology. Epistemology is linked to knowledge, right? Because our knowledge is relative, that is the epistemology, and our judgments are relative, that is the logical theory. And both of these together are termed as Syadvad, right? So, okay, let's talk about judgments for a second. So, consider this thing, this statement that test cricket ball is red. What will be the judgment? What will it be true or false? Judgments regards to truth value of a proposition. Okay, so is this statement true or false? This is of course true, right? This is of course true. But now, how will Jainas counter this? They will say test cricket ball is red only under some conditions. That condition is that it is seen under natural lighting. Maybe under some other color of light, it might seem that the ball is black. You never know, right? So they will say that you cannot claim that ball is red. You cannot claim this. They will say, and they will say that this is only a relatively true thing. This is not something which is absolutely true, and this depends on a lot of conditions, right? So this is how Syadvad is applied to judgments. Here you can see that. As a matter of fact, both Anekantvada and Syadvad are the two aspects of the same teaching, realistic and relativistic pluralism. Syadvad and Anekantvada, that is epistemology and metaphysics, are connected. I think that I have already explained to you, and the way I connected the justification part of epistemology and from there I saw that they are using a metaphysical thing, right? Like here, I saw that I showed you that the justification part has this metaphysical assumption. So that's how these both are connected, and that is what they are saying here. That Anekantvada and Syadvada are two aspects of the same teaching, realistic and relativistic pluralism. They are like two sides of the same coin. The metaphysical side, that reality has innumerable characters, is called Anekantvada, while the epistemological and logical side, that we know only some aspects of reality and that therefore all our judgments are necessarily relative, is called Syadvada. Okay, so this is done. Next, a thing has many characters and it exists independently. It is called substance. So substance is something which will be given different kind of definitions by different schools of Indian philosophy as well as different Western philosophers as well. What you can consider substance to be generally is something which exists independently. Right? That is what is the basic definition of a substance. And that is what Jainas believe also is a substance. It persists in and through all attributes and modes. Substance is defined as that which possesses qualities and modes. Out of these innumerable qualities of a substance, some are permanent and essential, while others are changing and accidental. Okay, so I will explain with an example what does what do we mean by qualities and modes. So consider there is a human being. So we have already seen what a universal is, right? So this human being will have a universal of humanness, and this universal will never change because we are once we are born a human, we also die as a human. So this is the quality or attribute of the substance. The substance here is this human, right? But consider now the height of this. Now consider the height of this substance. Now the height is varying. Okay, it varies with time, and hence it is a mode. It is accidental, whereas this is permanent. Okay, out of these innumerable qualities of substance, some are permanent and essential, while others are changing and accidental. The former are attributes, and the latter are modes. Substance and attributes are inseparable because the latter are the permanent essence of the substance and cannot remain without it. Now they are saying that attributes are primary. Without attributes, the substance cannot remain. So a human is defined by humanness. If there is no humanness in a human, it will not remain a human at all. Right? So substance existence is dependent on its attributes. And the modes are just secondary. Reality is unity and difference. So this term, unity and difference, you will come across this a lot more in your Vedanta chapters. So we will be reading this in detail then. Let's see what is given here. Viewed from the point of view of substance, a thing is one and permanent and real. Again, they are looking at the different sides of the reality now, in accordance with the Anekantvada view of metaphysics. When we look at from the point of view of substance, thing is one, permanent and real, right? When we look at a person from side of substance, we see humanness, the universal, which is one, which is permanent and which is real. And when we view from the point of modes, we see height, which is momentary and unreal. Now, real and unreal is used in a specific sense. Okay, so real generally in Indian philosophy is taken as something which is unchanging and which is permanent, and unreal is taken as something which is momentary. So reality should be permanent. That is what is generally considered in Indian philosophy. We will be reading about this in detail later. I just wanted to introduce you to this. Jainism here becomes a theological mean between Brahmanism and early Buddhism. Brahmanism you can equate it with Advaita Vedanta because Brahmanism is nothing but Upanishad and Advaita Vedanta is also based on Upanishads. Brahmanism emphasizes the one, the permanent, the real. You have already seen that in Advaita Vedanta, they emphasize that Brahm is the one permanent and only reality, right? And early Buddhism emphasizes the many, the changing, the unreal. You will come across early Buddhism in the next chapter, then you will understand this. Jainism point out that both are the two sides of the same thing. Again, now Jainism, sticking with their Anekantvada view, say that both these things are true, but from different perspectives. Substance, therefore, is also defined as that which possesses the three characteristics of production, destruction, and permanence. Substance has its unchanging essence and therefore is permanent, but it also has its changing modes and therefore is subject to origination and decay. To mistake one-sided and partial view as the whole truth is to commit the fallacy of Ekantvada. As Jainism takes into account all these partial views, it is called Anekantvada. Okay, so they will say that both Brahmanism and early Buddhism, because they are having only one viewpoint about the substance, they are looking at it from only one side, hence they commit a fallacy and they name this fallacy as fallacy of Ekantavad. You can understand the etymology of this name, Ekantvad, right? Which means that they are being very one-sided. Whereas because Jainism takes into account all the partial views, it is called Anekantvad or many-sided, right? Okay, so we will finish this video here. In the next video, we will be studying Syadvad, and I will ask you all to post questions down in the video if you have any one of them, and I will try to answer all the questions that you will be asking, right? Okay, then see you in the next video. Bye.